All right. Well, good morning, everyone. I'm your host for today, John Patton. I'm the Tennessee State Director for the American Federation for Children. And we have another Choice Chat for you this week. And I am very thrilled to introduce Heather Kistner. Heather and I have gotten to know each other a little bit. And Heather lives in Friendsville in Blount County in East Tennessee. And she has two sons, and we are very excited to welcome her today.
Good morning. Thanks, John.
Thank you. Heather, I would love for you to tell us a little bit about yourself, about your boys, and just kind of where you are in life.
Okay. So I am a happily married mom. My husband and I have two boys, Gavin and Bremen, and they are 10 and 12. We are from native Knoxvillians, but we currently live in Blount County, which is right outside of Knox County in East Tennessee. We are considered still kind of in the Knoxville metropolitan area. So a lot of folks in this community are going either from Maryville city schools or Blount County county schools, or even West Knoxville schools. So I am very familiar with the public school system. My boys both attended public school from pre-K to about second grade. They attended in Cumberland County when we lived there at the time.
Okay.
And now I've been a homeschool mom to both boys for about 4 years. And we are going to be re-entering either a public or non-public school for both children next school year, 22-23.
Okay. So you were already homeschooling when the pandemic hit.
Yes, thankfully.
Right. Did that, I guess, in what ways, if any, did that change homeschooling? I guess not as many field trips if you were wanting to, but.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, John, the homeschool realm has changed greatly in the past 10 years. When I was growing up, I'm in my mid 40s. When I was growing up, the homeschool community was very, very small. And it really only incorporated largely the religious population, Christian population. Now the homeschool community is very, very large in our area, and I'm positive it is elsewhere as well. And now it incorporates quite the diversity of kiddos, secular and non-secular.
Mm-hmm.
So when COVID hit, we were very involved in lots of groups, zoo groups and nature center groups and co-op groups, and those all were halted. Our library times were halted. And yes, all of our field trips were halted. So a lot of folks feel that, wow, you were lucky if you were homeschooling when COVID hit because your world didn't change at all. Whereas that's really not the case. Although we were just used to generally handling our children and their education. So that was really the main difference.
Yeah. No, you already had that, the rhythm of having to account for all the hours of the day with them being at home.
Yes.
My mother did some of the same. I was homeschooled through sixth grade. So, yeah, well, that certainly, at least in that regard, was an easier transition than some families who I think were really struggled massively to adjust to that dynamic.
Yes.
So your two boys, remind me what grades they're in currently?
They are rising 5th and rising 7th graders.
Okay.
So yes, if I were to put them on the academic scale for public schools.
Yes. Okay. And what was initially you and your husband's kind of reasons for moving them out of the schools that they were in, I guess, 4 years ago?
Well, we're all about transparency here when we chat about education. So what started the initial idea of homeschooling was I was afforded the opportunity to be a substitute teacher in the county school system. And while the county school system, the teachers, of course, and the staff are absolutely wonderful, the system is not able to feed each child's needs from an education standpoint. A lot of times, especially in rural communities, all communities, you have not only the education to fuel them, but you also have the at-home struggles that each child faces. So the school was just not equipped, in my view, to provide a well-rounded education for the boys. A lot of time was being spent kind of shuffling the kids from one class to another. The student-teacher ratio is incredibly high. It was averaging 20 to 22 with one teacher. And you would not have consistent teachers' assistants. They would bounce from class to class. And so with my youngest, who is diagnosed with ADD, attention deficit disorder, ODD, which is oppositional defiance disorder, and anxiety, like so many others, the attention was not able to be given to him. And so when they got home to me at 3:30 in the day, I was not receiving the best version of my child. And that was really disheartening. Not only was I not receiving the best version, we were tired. We were exhausted at the end of the day. And so there went the opportunities for the extracurricular activities, whether it be music or arts or sports, let alone homework, which often is the requirement or the need for public schools. And so it was inevitable that I needed to do something different, to kind of smooth the flow of our family.
Yeah. Yeah. So you were, like most parents do, you were taking stock of how your kids were doing, and you were attentive to their needs, and you were thinking, how are they going to actually flourish? What is the best conceivable environment that I can get for them? Which is
absolutely,
how vast majority of parents think when it comes to their kids' education.
Yes. Now, I will add to that, though. I know if this chat reaches other parents that are also wanting to bring their child out, and they're thinking, well, how on earth am I supposed to do that? I work full time. My husband and I fully recognize that is a huge struggle for a lot of families. Our family is by design a one income family. So that allows us to be a little bit flexible in what we do. And for the record, our family makes under $40,000 a year. Just because we're a one income family does not mean that my husband's bringing in six figures. It just means that we live in a regular house like other regular families. And we just place that importance in one parent being able to be at home a little bit more.
Yeah. No, that's wonderful. Yeah. And you're right. Every family is different, and every family isn't able to make exactly the same decisions. But ideally there is some kind of arrangement, whether it's homeschooling or a good charter or a independent school close by, some kind of arrangement where families, whatever the two parents are doing, can find that ideal environment for their kids' learning.
Yes, that's the goal, right?
It is, absolutely. So as you've kind of explored, your two sons going back to school, and potentially the local public school, and then potentially I guess there's not a charter school close to you, is there?
No. I believe that. Can you define what a charter school is considered now?
It's a publicly funded school, so it is a public school,
Okay.
but with a particular mandate for it could be a lot of them are sort of classic classical schools, or they have a particular arts or STEM kind of focus.
Okay.
And
Okay.
and it's not a zoned public school. So if you have
Okay.
you can go to a charter school from out of district.
Okay.
And in terms
Okay.
of rules, I don't know how far. I don't know all the ins and outs of how far you can travel. There may be no limits on that. You might be able to drive 45 minutes.
Okay. Well, I know
So
there is a charter school then. I wasn't sure if it was called a charter, but there is a charter school in Knox County then.
mhm,
It's the L&N Academy, and it is a STEM academy, and it is lottery based.
okay,
And it is a high school. Yeah, it's a high school. So,
okay.
yeah.
Well, so I sort of just distracted myself in the middle of my own question there, but I was going to say, so when you're looking at this next coming school year, you're looking at kind of local public and then independent schools. There are a few independent schools in your area fairly close by.
There are Montessori schools, a plethora of Montessori schools. There is Clayton Bradley Academy, which is in Maryville, which is a private school.
Mm-hmm.
And then there are Maryville City Schools, which is a tuition base, and you do have to apply, but I'm told that they are full. And then we are also in the realm of Alcoa City Schools, which is also tuition school. And by tuition, I'm talking maybe $2,000 a year. So it's
Okay.
the ability for a child that lives in the city of Maryville, Tennessee, or the city of Alcoa, Tennessee, that is where they would be zoned. And I don't believe that they pay that tuition, but I could be wrong on that.
Okay.
And so, yeah, there are non-public schools available, but the cost comes into play for a family like ours.
Sure. Sure. Absolutely. And those, I guess, roughly, and not exact numbers is fine, but tuition range for some of those schools. What are we talking about roughly?
Tuition ranges from whether it be the Montessori or Episcopal School of Knoxville, Clayton Bradley in Blount County is anywhere from 11 to 16,000
Okay.
per year. Clayton Bradley is year-round school. The financial aid, was that going to be your next question?
Yes, go for it.
Okay. The financial aid is an interesting bucket of information. The Montessori schools in the area, which when I say schools, I mean 5, 6, 7 schools. Not all of them are pre-K through 12.
Mm-hmm.
Some of them are just pre-K, pre-K through 5, middle, and then there's one that is 8 through 12. They are nonprofit, and their financial aid abilities are less than 12% financial aid for a family. So that leaves it to being almost unreachable, unattainable for a family like ours. And
Yeah.
then Clayton Bradley, they do offer tuition assistance up to 50%, give or take, because they do receive some pretty heavy scholarship and funding from the area.
Yeah.
So you're sort of limited. And then for the Christian schools, I think that's kind of a different bucket all in itself. And I don't quite have the information for them,
Yeah.
but it's really all over the board.
Yeah. But these some of these independent schools that you've looked at, the Montessori's or the Clayton Bradley, they do have resources, if I'm not mistaken, for ADHD and ODD and things like that. Is that correct?
Well, I have learned very recently that at least for the Montessori and the Clayton Bradley, when you're dealing in the private school world, they do not have special accommodations for children with a variety of diagnosis. They do have a child psychologist. I know the Clayton Bradley school does.
Mm-hmm.
But the biggest difference with these schools is the student teacher ratio is so low.
Mm.
So if I have 10 children and one teacher, what a
Right.
wonderful day
Right.
that
Right. Right.
would be. And just the culture is set up so much differently as well.
Yeah.
Whereas if you have the public school and 20 to 22 to one teacher, then no, you can't handle that.
Right.
So it is a
So
little bit different.
right. So even if obviously there are certain needs that certainly require specialists, but there are some things that are not fixed, but certainly made easier by that smaller teacher to student ratio.
Yes,
Um,
yes. They have time to
yeah.
have a separate conversation with that child for a moment and not be disruptive to the rest of the class while doing so.
Yeah. Yeah.
Mhm.
Well, as you know, and as we've talked about a little bit, the legislature in Tennessee passed an ESA law in 2019. It's been hung up in the courts since then, and it is a program for families, for lower income families to be able to get roughly just over 7,000 per child, about 7,300.
Mhm.
It's been caught up in the courts. It we have high hopes for its passage, or some other version of it in the not too distant future. But
Mhm.
there are still definite vocal opponents of this program, and I guess I would love to. What would you have to say? What would be your message to those who are still, and maybe even for some, from some good motives and some good heart reasons, are still in opposition to programs like this, and expansion of charters and everything else that kind of restricts it to kind of your local brick and mortar school?
Mhm. So, for those individuals that don't feel it necessary to provide those funds to families, I would love to know why. I would just love to have a better understanding of where they're coming from. Is it the funds to go to the program versus the funds to go to another program? What does the betterment of those funds accomplish by placing them in bucket B rather than our bucket A? Because those funds directly impact families such as ours to be able to have a choice in education that's best suited for our children. So, by me not having access to those funds, one of the reasons, or the main reason that I don't have access to those funds, is because we are a homeschool family. When you are a homeschool family, I don't have a IEP for my ADD son, and so because I don't have an IEP, I can't take that information and give it to a school of choice if
Mm,
that school of choice isn't a participant in the ESA program.
yeah.
If they are a participant in the ESA program, I still don't have the IEP because I don't have the background of my child having been gone to a public school.
Right.
So, I think there's a couple different challenges going on as far as the ESA program being out there for all educational, you know, educational folks to have it in their hands. Because if they can all have it in their hand, then we can address, okay, if you don't have an IEP, what else can we provide the families to show that those funds can be allotted to them?
Yeah. And quick little technical note here. You're referring to our IEA program, which actually is an ESA program that's
Yes.
specifically for
Yes.
children with special needs.
Thank you, John.
And
Yes.
yes, and you are correct that you have
Yeah.
to bring you have to have that IEP coming from the public school system to be able to bring to the
Yes.
private school, and that private school has to already be a participant and have applied to get into the IEA program.
Yes.
And then on top of that, they have to obviously be able to meet the needs that you actually have.
Yes.
So
yes.
it's
my apologies, the acronyms.
no, I know it's word salad. Please, Dad,
Yes.
don't worry about it. So that's a real hurdle. I think just the exposure and the growth of the IEA program is something that needs to happen. And then when I said ESA, I was also talking about the broader sort of program for any children in certain income levels to be able to access kind of any private school.
Yes. Because I think too. Go ahead. Sorry.
No. I'm sorry. I interrupted you.
I just think our children have so many shades of need to them. It's kind of like, I don't know why I just thought of this. I have a Dolly Parton t-shirt that I love, and one of her songs is The Coat of Many Colors.
Oh yeah.
And I was thinking about children, right? Those children have so many different coats that they wear. And I think the public school system tends to place them in an environment in which they can only wear one coat. If they don't like that coat, they're uncomfortable. Yeah. They're not confident. They're not made to feel like they're in their place, that they can say, I went to school and it's my school because I learned A through Z, and not all of it had to do with academics. And so isn't the goal to provide an educational atmosphere for all of our children, regardless of what's, in our coat closet?
Yeah.
It's just so important.
Yeah. That's a great analogy. That's really, that makes a lot of sense to me. And there are zone public schools that really work for a kid, and they work for a family. And then
absolutely,
there are lots that it doesn't, and it needs to be charter or homeschool, or Montessori school or Catholic school or something else.
Absolutely. And I don't think that the challenge is because of the staff or the hired teachers or the retiring teachers or the principal that's been there for 20 years, or maybe one that's just been there 2 years. The whole team itself, I don't feel is broken. It's the funding that's allotted to those schools. It's the buildings. It's the grounds. It's the policies in place that these teachers have to follow that maybe they don't feel is the best. And one of the interesting things about Clayton Bradley, and I'm sorry to single them out, but that's my only knowledge at this moment in this area. But one of the wonderful things that they have incorporated into their model of teaching is their teachers come from around the U.S. They're not from Friendsville or from Blount County. They're from a lot of different places, and they're allowed to write and teach and bring in all sorts of resources into their plan book for the year, while still having the right accreditations for that student to graduate. So they still are using bits and pieces of the Common Core, but they're also bringing in other tools and resources to best accommodate who they're teaching. And what a gift that is. Yeah,
that's really neat. That sounds very cool. And I haven't been familiar with the school before. We had talked about it, but that sounds like a great place. And I'll say, side note too, we actually, my family and I, we have a dog, and her name is Jolene. So
love Jolene.
You can appreciate that. Well, I think just going back to the ESA question, the choice question, this is something that polls, I think in the wake of COVID, and there were some favorable polls before COVID, but in the wake of COVID, Tennesseans, a pretty significant majority of Tennesseans are thinking like you, at least when they're answering poll questions, and they are in favor of more and more choice options for families. And it's moved, fairly significly. Again, unsurprising after the last 18 months, but the numbers have moved, and our hope, my hope for sure, is that we have a real program to implement. In addition to hopefully an expansion of the IEA program, we have a meaningful ESA program to implement. It's not going to be a cure-all. It's not a silver bullet. There is no such thing. But these are big problems to solve. So there's never a silver bullet for them. But I think it will make a meaningful difference. And I think even if the perfect school wasn't close by, Clayton Bradley is not a perfect school. There's no such thing as a perfect school. But just the ability to do something other than only go to your zone public school. If the day came where you decided that you were going to work outside the home or something like that, who knows? Whatever families need. And so, I think your voice here and your story and your efforts to find what's best for your boys it's compelling, and the stories are piling up in a good way. And I'm hoping that your voice is just yet another to push Tennessee towards having a lot of choice options.
Absolutely. I mean, we allow choices. We try to allow choices in every other realm of our life, but isn't one of the most important choices education, and education given to our children that we feel best accommodates our children's imagination and their mind and their ability to feel fulfilled, even if it's harder or more complicated to get there. Wouldn't that make a huge difference in everyone's life? Because the impact of a well-educated mind, that's life-changing. That's world-changing if you give those tools to that child, because you're not going to know where that child is going to flourish if you don't allow them to have all the tools in their toolbox for them to at least see, at least have a glimpse of what's available to them. And that's the goal. That's the goal of our family. And I hope it's the goal of all those, watching and listening and pondering how change can be made.
Yeah. No, very, very wise words. And I definitely agree. Do you have any final thoughts, anything that we didn't touch on, or anything that you would, like to have said that maybe we haven't gotten to?
I think income should never be a question of attaining the best for your family, whether it be food, healthcare, education, transportation. Everyone deserves and should have the ability to be their best self. And it starts within our families here in our house, spreads to our neighborhoods, spreads to our cities and our regions. And it starts with regular folks just like me. I have on jeans and tennis shoes below the screen. I have two boys that I struggle to have one brush their teeth every day. I'm a regular mom, and that shouldn't matter if I'm a regular mom. But we all just deserve the opportunity to provide the best for our families. So I agree. And that, this is a tad bit of a controversial thing to say, but I think there often is there's an assumption that people don't know how to make the best decisions for their children, and that's why there is this superstructure
that knows how to, quote, educate all children. And I think, yeah, there's an assumption that sometimes regular people like me or like yourself don't really know what it takes to educate our children in the best way. And couldn't be more false. And nobody knows better than the parents of their children. So
absolutely. Absolutely. And I think with a good school, and meaning a good school that fits the child, with that though comes all of the resources that flow out to that family. So I don't know what's available at A, B, or C school either. But if I'm introduced to that, then that opens a book of questions that I can become, very literate on. And that's a wonderful thing. So the education passes on to the family, not just to the child.
Yeah. All right, Heather. Well, I've really enjoyed this. It's good to talk to you again, and yeah, really always nice to meet in person or in person on Zoom.
Yes,
So
agreed.
Yeah, thank you so much, and we're hopeful for this next season, this next year, and what can happen in Tennessee. And your voice is definitely a part of it. So thank you very much.
Thank you very much. Have a great day, everyone.
You too.
Bye.
Bye, Heather.